First of all, I just want to get into the purpose of your trip. What is the purpose of your trip to Southern California?
Sure. In fact, thank you for the opportunity, because I would offer you a two-part answer. First, we have for the last 4 years been engaged, we, the State Department, Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, or Drugs and Thugs, as we are popularly known in Washington, have been engaged in a policy, a strategy, and effort to develop partnerships with state and local authorities in the United States of America. Why? Because our traditional partners in federal law enforcement and in the Department of Justice are to a certain extent tapped out. We have programs in more than 80 countries around the world, and there's a limit to how many personnel they have. And second, because there are some crimes, some issues that federal law enforcement does not manage. Federal law enforcement does not do domestic violence. Federal law enforcement does not do crowd control. Federal law enforcement doesn't do traffic control, for example. So this visit has been an opportunity to sign an MOU with a new partner, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, to meet with a partner that we have had for more than 2 years, the California Attorney General, to meet with a partner that I hope I can convince would be of value in engaging with us, and that is the San Diego Police Department. That's issue one. Issue two, may I suggest, started a week and a day ago when the President of the United States rolled out and announced his fiscal year 2016 budget, where he announced $1 billion to support programs in Central America. And this is important because for the last 15 years, we have engaged first in Colombia, under Plan Colombia, with considerable success. Second, with Mexico under the Merida Initiative, where, in my opinion, we are now seeing some success. We have left this hole in between the two countries that we call Central America, and this is an opportunity in a state that feels the impact, whether it's movement of migrants, unaccompanied children, drugs, weapons, people, feels the effect of this hole in our cooperation in Central America, and this is an opportunity to talk about it and explain what we are trying to do to address it.
Well, let's talk about some of those effects. It appears that the decriminalization of marijuana in the United States is changing the illicit drug trade. Mexican cartels are smuggling cheap heroin and methamphetamine across the border to replace marijuana. How worried are you?
Yep. I mean, may I alter your the premise of your question, but very slightly, but for reasons that will become very clear. I do agree with you that professional drug trafficking organizations are moving more heroin to the United States than in past years. I also agree with you that they are doing it in order to fill a hole in the market in the United States. But that hole, in my opinion, is not caused by marijuana. It is caused by cocaine and the fact that since the year 2007, the consumption of cocaine in the United States of America has dropped by nearly 50%. That's 50%. Now that's a useful statistic for all of us to be aware of, particularly those who say our efforts in Colombia and our efforts in Mexico have produced no results. I would say a 50% reduction in consumption of cocaine is a real result worth mentioning. What has then happened? I would suggest to you what has happened over the last 5 years. As demand for cocaine has dropped, we have found in a growing number of areas of the United States, individuals who for a number of years had fed a heroin or opiate-based habit by using diverted medicines, breaking them up, and in a sense getting the effect of a hit of heroin through medication. What we see now is that the cost of doing that has risen to such an extent, once again due to efforts by us and by domestic law enforcement, federal, state, and local, that it is now cheaper for those individuals to buy pure heroin on the black market rather than to divert medications that are prescribed by doctors and medical facilities around the United States of America. That in turn is more dangerous. First, because you're dealing with professional criminals and narcotics traffickers. Second, because you don't know the purity of the heroin that you are buying. And third, it is far more difficult to control the amount of consumption, the amount that you're taking in, if you are taking it as pure heroin, leading to more overdoses, leading to more deaths, leading to greater dangers for the United States. That, I believe, is the challenge that we're facing right now.
Last month, a drone full of methamphetamine crashed near the San Ysidro border crossing here in San Diego. How well equipped is the U.S. to combat drug smuggling through drones?
May I tell you, drones or UAVs are probably one of the great challenges, not just for the United States, but for all 190, I think there are 196 countries represented in the United Nations today. And I suggest to you the challenge of drones and UAV technology is going to be the challenge of the 21st century. Part of it is what you've just described, which is its use by criminal organizations to move product across borders without detection. We've seen other challenges as well. You may recall a couple of weeks ago there was an incident in the White House in Washington, D.C. of a drone that popped in for a visit without any notification or preparations. That's complicated. We hear from the media, which by definition means it must be true, of a number of incidents in which commercial aviation, sometimes passenger airlines, have near misses as they're approaching or departing from airports, and the risk, obviously, to safety in aviation is a challenge that we're going to have. We are exploring, by the way, in law enforcement, the use of drones in terms of tracking or monitoring the movement of professional criminal organizations. I have to tell you, I don't have a good answer to your question right now, but I can tell you that it is part of this package of issues that we have to work through over the next 10 years as we figure how to incorporate this technology, which is not just growing, it's booming now. It's almost exploding in terms of its growth in our own lives and our own approach to business in the 21st century.
Well, let's talk about the use of drones by law enforcement. The Inspector General concluded last month that the government's border drones program is very expensive and results in far fewer arrests of people crossing the border illegally. How much faith do you have in drones reducing illegal activity at the border?
Yep, fair question. And I'm not even sure what Inspector General or what agency, but my guess is any IG could have reached that same conclusion. Let me tell you where I am. I am responsible as the Assistant Secretary for Drugs and Law Enforcement, but overseas. I am responsible for supporting counter-drug and other programs that combat international crime in more than 80 countries around the world. And I acknowledge we actually have considered and even tested the use of UAVs or drone technology in a number of situations. We have tested its use over land in fairly confined areas such as the Central American Isthmus, and we have tested their use over water, particularly in the Caribbean, to determine where they might be of some value. May I tell you that roughly 2 years into this process, we actually do not support UAVs in any of our programs. What conclusion should you draw from that? I suppose the correct conclusion from my perspective is we have not yet figured how to balance all of the issues, cost versus benefit, reliability of the equipment, privacy issues. I mean, they're less severe for us because anywhere that I operate is overseas, not in the United States, but non-Americans also have privacy concerns. And then, frankly, their overall effectiveness in terms of the distance that they can range and how much information they bring back to law enforcement. I don't know the answer to your question. What I can say to you right now is that from my perspective, I have not yet found the right place the right time and the right mission to warrant and justify spending from our budget to create a drone or a UAV program.
So I want to switch gears to unaccompanied minors. The number of unaccompanied minors crossing into the U.S. from Mexico has fallen since the summer, but immigration experts say that there might be a new surge in May or June. Is the Obama administration prepared to handle another influx?
Well, thank you for that question, because as I mentioned at the start, President Obama did announce Monday a week ago $1 billion, let me repeat that number, $1 billion proposed for the year 2016 to support programs in Central America. Why is Central America important in terms of the response to your question? Because our conclusion last summer was that nearly 100% of the unaccompanied minor children were actually coming from Central America. Not from Mexico, not from the Caribbean, not from further down in South America, but from Central America. So the answer to your question is yes, we have decided to commit the resources to this issue. Second, what are we trying to do? We're trying to address the root causes of the problem. Poor economies, lack of employment possibilities, social issues, crime on the streets, violence, the danger and risk to children, leading parents to be willing to take the risk of sending their children unaccompanied to the United States of America. We have also recommitted to working with the institutions of government in the 7 Central American countries, but particularly those that we call the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, in order to work to ensure that they have better control over their own borders, that they have better ability to provide community policing and security in their own communities, so that at the end of the day we have both a positive inducement for parents to keep their children at home and the negative sanctions of police and law enforcement to ensure that those professional trafficking organizations, criminals who move people for profit and at great risk to their clients, that they are held accountable and eventually are put out of business. That is how we're trying to address the issue as we prepare for the summer of 2015.
Got 2 more questions. So Congressional Republicans are threatening to cut funding to the Department of Homeland Security as a way to block the president's executive action on immigration. What would a cut in funding do to the executive action?
Listen, I'm obviously not the right person to talk to in terms of funding and budget for the Department of Homeland Security. I'm the Assistant Secretary of State, and furthermore, my responsibilities are 100% overseas and in foreign countries. I will say this, however, because this is squarely within my responsibilities and squarely within my knowledge. The Department of Homeland Security is an excellent partner. Let me say it again, an excellent partner with the INL Bureau, with my teams overseas in terms of programs. CBP works with us in a number of Central American countries to build greater ability in those countries to control and manage their own borders. ICE is an excellent partner in terms of developing capabilities to both investigate and eventually prosecute organizations that traffic. The United States Coast Guard is an absolutely essential partner as we attempt to support efforts to control and reduce smuggling of drugs, of weapons, of people by the sea routes. Obviously, the extent to which those important partners are not able to work with us in our programs overseas will have an impact in terms of what we can deliver.
Okay, final question. Last June, Mexican security forces were accused of executing 15 suspected gang members. Mexican police have been implicated in the kidnapping and presumed killing of 43 students in September by a local drug gang. There are calls for the Obama administration to stop giving aid to Mexico unless President Peña Nieto takes action to stop human rights abuses. How likely is it that President Obama will condition aid to Mexico on its human rights record?
Look, I'm not going to speculate, obviously, in terms of where the president is going to come out on any issue. He is more than capable of speaking for himself. I will offer two comments, however. The first is that the United States Congress has already inserted conditions and requirements in its own legislation, actually since the beginning of our support for Mexico under the Merida Initiative, an agreement that was reached in 2007 and the first budget for which was passed in the year 2008. And there are conditions in there that limit the use of United States appropriated funds with individuals or units that are believed or reasonably believed to have committed human rights abuses of some sort. And in the case of my own budget, a specific percentage, 15%, is withheld each year until such time as the Secretary of State, or actually I believe it is the President, reports to Congress on a number of specific questions that Congress asks. So I would suggest at the very start that there is already a high degree of conditionality in the support that the United States of America provides to Mexico to address these issues. The second part of my answer, however, I think is even more important. Please remember, we did not begin this cooperative relationship with Mexico in the year 2007 as a favor or as a gift. We began it because we concluded that it was in the interest of the United States of America as much as in the interest of Mexico that we work to address these security issues. It wasn't that we were being generous, it was that the drugs, the people, the firearms, the money laundering was moving across our borders and having a direct impact on the United States of America. That's why we agreed with the government of Mexico to the Merida Initiative. That is why we have provided since the year 2008 somewhat in excess of $2.3 billion. But may I also note as well that the government of Mexico has invested 13 of their dollars for every $1 that the United States of America invests in the Merida Initiative. Now, let's go to the fundamental question. Are there issues, problems, individuals, or even units in Mexico that have in fact engaged in behavior that does not meet either Mexican standards or international standards on human rights? Yes, although a skeptic could also note that that probably occurs from time to time in the United States of America as well. The point from my perspective is the way to address that problem, the way to ensure that that problem is reduced and eventually eliminated, is to work together with Mexican government authorities at the federal and state level to provide more professional, better trained police and law enforcement. Because my theory for the last 4 years is that the best defense against abuses of human rights by law enforcement personnel is to train and professionalize those personnel, because professional police do not commit human rights abuses. The human rights abuse separates the police from the community, and the ultimate objective is for the police to be an inherent part of the community, which the community sees as part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
William Brownfield, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.